But it's really my distinct honor to introduce Tom Nowaczyk. Tom is the Director of Product Management for NeuStar, where he oversees verification compliance solutions. Tom has been at NeuStar for 5 years, building products of verified enhanced consumer identity data to improve operational efficiency, mitigate risk and fraud, and manage compliance. Prior to joining NeuStar, Tom was a manager of marketing analytics at Rosetta Stone. Tom has an undergraduate degree from the University of Delaware and an MBA from the University of Maryland. What I find most interesting is we read this bio, but what else about Tom? So I reached out to him, I said, what's your passion? And Tom said, my passion is analytics in terms of sales and operational effectiveness. I go, okay, that's awesome that you do that. Sounds more like work. What it is on a personal side? And he said, craft coffee. Who's familiar with craft coffee, that term? Okay, just a few of you in there. So I went to a reliable source wiki, and I thought I'd give you the definition of craft coffee. It's a rather new term in the industry, refers to pursuit of making a cup of high quality coffee, while also engaging consumers in the story of the coffee, from the origin of the beans to how it's brewed in your local coffee shop. So if you get Tom after the presentation, ask about craft coffee. Again, thank you from Noble Systems. Appreciate the opportunity.
Make this all possible. My name is Tom Nowaczyk. I work at NeuStar. NeuStar is an information services and analytics company. Many of you know us from our wireless do not call or the NPAC business. The wireless do not call is actually migrating over to our friends at iConnective on the FCC timeline that you can find online. But one thing to keep in note, our commercial TCPA services will continue with NeuStar as we move forward. So I'm going to try not to bludgeon you too much with TCPA today. It is very near and dear to my heart, but I want to make sure this is an effective use of everyone's time. So we'll talk a little bit more about what we're hearing in the industry across customer experience and go from there. So from when we start thinking about business and we start thinking about how do we make customer experience better, we really need to kind of answer the question, well, how do we make the experience better and what do we need to do to get that? And when we start thinking about what's perfection in this space, it's really around knowing who you're interacting with, understanding what their contact information is, how that consumer wants to convert, how you should be interacting with them. Understanding when their information changes so you can place the most effective call or have the most effective agent on the other line. And then once you transact with them, understanding when they're happy or unhappy, and really link that identity of that consumer across this whole interaction. And that, I think, is what my passion is and really where I see this industry going. The challenge is really, our world's a lot more complex than that, simple green field. Really what we see is that, there's point solutions to help with some of these, but it's really hard for anyone to do them all. And that businesses really need to think smartly about how do I invest to get the most return on my investment. And really where we see this going is that smart companies are starting to interact with both, getting insights internally from their own data, which is critically important, getting insights from vendors, and then really using a hybrid approach. Really it's all three of those will make you successful in this space as we go forward. As I started thinking more about this presentation and really, where we are in a customer experience setting, it kind of harkened back to a podcast I recently listened to. I don't know, does anybody in the room listen to Planet Money? It's a podcast. So there was a story a couple of weeks ago on a gentleman named Tom Burrell. He was one of the first African-American advertisers. So he was really the pioneer. He really kind of started the targeting of African-American consumers. And really, I'm not going to go through all the details. I definitely recommend you listen to the podcast. But it talked about how from this is really where modern marketing came from. How we start to segment, target marketers all came from this one gentleman. And it got me thinking about the call center space and really in customer experience space that we're really still in the early days of this. We're really starting to just really segment data at a really high level and really bring big data to bear. So I think there's a lot of corollaries. And as we go through this, as I start thinking about what trends are we seeing, NeuStar is a rather large company. We have relationships with, across a variety of industries. I think me personally, our products, we tend to have a lot of relationships with big banks. You name it, there's a bunch of industries. But first is focus on quality. We've been hearing this a lot. There's, really where we see this industry going is a little bit where the fraud industry was 7 or 8 years ago, where, there's usually not one data insight that can rule them all. Just says, hey, let's get this one piece of data and it's going to fix everything. It doesn't work like that. Fundamentally, it's really about getting the highest quality data and then overlaying it. So if you talk to the smartest minds in fraud, what they do is they have waterfalls. They use the best piece of data to predict this, the best piece of data to predict this, and they're building waterfalls around it. And I think there's a lot of corollary. So I would recommend all of you guys to start thinking, if you want to research new and innovative ways to do it, take a look at the fraud industry. They're actually pretty interesting in their approach. The next one is amplify your own data. I touched on this a little bit, but really, vendors' data is great. I mean, we'll sell data, but at the end of the day, it's we don't want to sell data, and you don't want to buy data. You want to buy insights to make your processes better, and really insights that are going to amplify your own data. And really, that's the investment. When you buy from a vendor, you're making a commitment to use that and really make your processes better. Because if we're not doing that, we shouldn't even do the deal and do the business. And then lastly, I think as a whole, we all need to think about what's good for the consumer is good for us. Happy consumer makes a happy customer, makes a happy process. This is really simple, but fundamentally, I think we all need to keep that focused. At the end, really at the end of the day, companies are trying to either get revenue, or make their customers happy so they don't churn out. But ultimately, there's only a few KPIs that really matter. And fundamentally, if we can get focus on the consumer, I think that's good for everyone. So I would take a step back and really start thinking about, let's imagine a new world where you can improve your call center experience while driving profitability, customers' long-term value, and then reduce cost and manage risk. Fundamentally, I mean, that's the dream, and really, how do you get there? And I think that's really what you guys are all in here today to determine for your own companies. So I'm going to talk through a few common problems with our fictional Holly Sherman, VP of Marketing. These are things we hear in the market. I'm going to talk through some of these in detail, and then I'm going to talk through just really quickly a few others. And then I'll wrap up with kind of what we see as best practices. So these are questions we hear all the time. Kind of, how do I manage TCPA risk? Is that my customer calling? Getting at, is this a spoofed inbound call? Is another thing that we hear. Or maybe it's not a spoofed inbound call. It's a call from a different phone number that you don't have on a customer. How do I reach prospects that didn't convert? How do customers know it's my company calling? This gets at spoofed outbound calls as opposed to spoofed inbound. They're both issues in the industry. And then, when should I contact a consumer to maximize right party contact rates? That one's a little bit near and dear to my heart, but we can talk more about that. So, how do we manage TCPA risk? I promise I'll keep this short. So this is a complicated chart. I hate these charts. Our marketing team loves them. But really, I think the paradigm, I wouldn't get too caught up in the chart, is the way to think about your own data. If you stratified your data between best and worst, I mean, every data set, I've worked with, the whitest of the white gloves banks, and they have some terrible data too. And so really, if you stratified between best and worst, and I think it's, and you looked at, percent of right party contacts in the best, you're gonna be close to 90%. And then percent of right party contacts in your worst, close to 2%. And so fundamentally, really what we instruct clients is, one, revenue per dial and risk. Your risk, you tend to have more risk at that lower end worst slide or bucket. And your best is really where all your right party contacts and revenue are coming from. And so really focusing on the best is is smart for your business. Save money on dialing. Don't waste your resources. Really focus where the fish are. My terrible click art of a fish icon. But really, I think that's my key takeaway for these products. These products don't just have to be about, hey, how do I manage my TCPA risk? You need to elevate. You need to say, not only how do I manage my TCPA risk, but how do I get the most out of my investment? And really, that means managing my TCPA risk while also managing my right party contact rates and really maximizing them. So common problem 2, is that my customer calling? So a lot of companies struggle with this. We ran some numbers, and it was something I think I'll cover on the next slide, but a significant portion of consumers, 49%, or 49% of companies, aren't using advanced computer telephony to determine who's calling on the inbound, who's calling. And really what we get to here is, I have Time Warner Cable, I call Time Warner Cable from my work phone. Is Time Warner going to be able to match that back to me? Or are they going to route me to a new sales agent and waste that new sales agent's time? The cost of going to the wrong queue, as you all know, is expensive. So really what we focus on is, hey, let's figure out who that identity is. And there's lots of products across the market that can help with this. This, another complex chart, really gets at that point. The thing to focus on is that, we're seeing 90% containment in this chart, or 89%, and we're saying 11% are unidentified. But if you use advanced matching technologies, you can pick up another 5%. And 5% can mean a lot if you're a big call center, and you have a call that's $3.50 per call. Every call you contain, you're saving money. And so really what we see smart companies trying to invest and saying, hey, if we contain these calls, it's a better customer experience, less customers in the queue. Ultimately, customers are happy, and we reduce costs. It's a win-win. So really, kind of the takeaway is, if you contain calls, you're going to save some money. And so I talked through my top 2. I'm not going to bludgeon you with kind of more real details. I just wanted to talk through a few other things and what we're hearing. I'd welcome you to talk to NeuStar or other vendors in the space, because a lot of people are providing really good solutions across the stack, and really determining what's good for your company, I think, is most important. So one, how do I reach prospects who didn't buy? The question becomes, this gets down, have you identified who that consumer is? And if you have identified them, you might be able to reach them in another channel. How do customers know it's my company calling? One of the things that we're seeing, we talked a little bit about, is there are advances coming in caller ID. There's authenticated caller ID that's close to being in market. So I'd welcome you guys all to look at that. I think it's going to be a really interesting time when a consumer knows that, if it's my Chase credit card calling me, that I actually really know it's Chase. And then lastly, when should I contact a consumer to maximize right party contact rates? There's lots of models in the space, and I think they're just getting better and better. There's more data being brought to bear, and I think this is only going to be better for consumers. Ultimately, when you're making less calls and consumers are getting less calls, but you're still having the same revenue growth rate you're looking at, I think that's a win-win for everyone. So to sum this all up, best practices. Ultimately, from our perspective, reducing friction is critical. Improving customer experience to drive revenue growth and customer satisfaction is really what we all should be in the business of. To do this, we recommend that one, that you identify prospects. Identity is key. You'll hear this talked about a lot in the marketing world. It hasn't come to the customer experience world, but we expect to see a big crossover in the coming years. Enhance customer experience with your CRM. You have valuable insights in your CRM that can really drive better experience for your customers, whether in the queue or how to deal with those consumers. This is really a place where you can amplify your own data by adding insights from vendors. Drive conversions with intelligent call routing. Route the right call to the right agent is going to ultimately drive higher KPIs across your stack. Remarket for increased conversions. This is a newer item, but if you could find information on when you have inbound calls and they don't convert or they don't make it to the agent, ultimately there's good services out there that can really help you with omni-channel remarketing. Really go from just having that inbound call to really trying to interact with that consumer in other ways. and then really cleanse data for TCPA and efficiency in dialing. Don't dial bad numbers. Ultimately, it's just going to cause risk and non-conversion. So if you focus on where the fish are, that's really where you're going to get the most value. That's all I have for today. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you again, Pace.
All right, everyone.